This is what if issei was part of the Holy Sword project. Now this is going to be a slight difficult what if to make, because, hold on a second guys. So like I said, issei is part of the Holy Sword project in a sad way. Issei and Kiba were both devout followers of God. Issei being one who was mainly dragging Eren into church. When his parents would die one day, this made him really sad, as he would be taken in by the church and had to train to use the holy swords. And he actually was the strongest holy swordsman, even able to wield the Excaliburs. And this surprised the man, Valper. When Kiba would say, and Kiba at this point wouldn't know about his sacred gear, and Issei wouldn't very much know about his, but they were actually bunkmates. Issei's hair stayed the way it was since he was from when he was little in this version, so yeah. As he's just walking around, they're doing their thing, it's about nighttime, and Kiba and him are having their nightly sparring session, training with no abilities or anything, just with hand-to-hand and some kendo swords to use as sword practice. And this will actually make a stronger Kiba, so yeah. Kiba is doing his thing, actually being able to deflect Issei's sword quite well. As Kiba was actually able to injure Issei a little bit, but not really kill him. It wasn't really an injury, more just a little bit of a bruise which shocked Issei a little bit. They were completely fine after that though, and he was like, alright, good job. And Issei is known as the strongest swordsman there. He's on multiple times best of the instructors, even completely outdoing most of the grown men who they have them training with. Mainly using where they have to use a 2-on-1, and Kiba is one of the only people who can actually keep up with him. They're nicknamed the top two, and they've actually shown the best ability with sword. Kiba being actually able to pick up the Excaliburs, only one of them at a time though, and being able to swing them only for a few minutes before he started getting tired and it was extending his swordsman ability with the holy swords. Issei, on the other hand, could wield two of them, at one point putting one in his mouth, even having three, swinging them like they were his normal weapons for around 20 minutes and then having to set them down. And this is when most of the instructors were impressed, since none of them could barely even get Excalibur off the ground, and most of the other kids couldn't either. There was only one other kid who was actually Kiba's who was actually good friends with Kiba and Issei. He was one of the only people who could actually pick up an Excalibur. Though he showed best potential with Excalibur Destruction, he was only able to use that. And at this point, he was showing best with Excalibur Destruction, Kiba with Excalibur Mimic, and Issei with... I'm not even sure which Excalibur to give him. I'll be honest about that. I really don't know which one. I'm going to say it was the one Fried had. It was Excalibur Shine, I think. Whatever, it was the glowy one. The one that was powerful, but more... Actually, Excalibur, the speed one, would go to Kiba, and Issei would get the Mimic one. And they were these three powerhouses, and they were able to use the swords and struggle a little bit with them only after a while. And the night whenever everything goes bad, they were told to hand in their Excaliburs for the night. Them never having to do this before, but they said okay, tossing their Excaliburs over so people could try lifting them and barely being able to struggle to pull them over and put them up. They said they had run maintenance on them, saying okay. And this is when Valper would actually have extracted all of the swords, the holy sword ability, from Issei and the other two, Kiba and Kono. I'm going to name him Kono in this version. Kono being really happy about this. He's like, yeah, we're that good, guys. But they have to run maintenance on our swords, man, so we should just do some regular sparring. This is when they would all bust out their sacred gears. Kono, having a surprising one, he had a kind of fragment of the dividing gear, which was called, I think, I'm just going to call it Speed Steel, where it basically was tiny wings out the back, which was a fragment, one of the original fragments of the Divine Dividing Gear. It was basically the weaker version of it, which I know I've made different videos where it basically contradicts this, but whatever, let's go with it. And he basically, the whole thing is, anytime he connects with someone, he can take half their speed, and it will boost his double to what, and it'll take that half it took away from them and add it onto his own, making him easily able to outspeed anyone in any moments. Now, it doesn't matter what happened. That person who he was taking speed from could die. He'd keep that speed until he turned off the gear, and then it would reset, dispersing all the speed and giving it back to the original person. So as long as he just kept it out, it would keep taking speed. Issei having his regular boosted gear, which he's trained at this point to barely be in its normal form. And Kiba, knowing about his sword birth, creates a regular just steel sword, which was actually his main weapon, which he could make any sword, but he made a large black katana. And they went to their whole sparring thing, and they were able to go dead even each one. Noting that without their holy swords, they were actually dead stalemates. Issei was just the most powerful with his holy swords. Now he wasn't sure about it, as this night they took all their holy ability out of them, and probably didn't think they'd ever be able to wield holy swords again. And they put those three alone into one gym. And this was called the Crystal, which was basically the strongest one of the group. Because even if all the other kids together put all their energy into one stone, they still didn't have enough holy energy to wield a single sword. Well, this one could wield all of the swords like it was nothing. Kind of surprising them a little bit. But anyway, back to the video. Issei is walking, going to bed, laying down, when he hears, them bust in and try to kill everyone. Issei saying he wouldn't die like this. Kiba and I forgot what I called him, whatever. And the other kid would all three would try running out the building, which was because the other kid sacrificed, saying, "Go, you can survive this and get revenge." Hearing that magical little word, revenge, they actually did. They ran. Kiba hating that he had to abandon some people, and Issei being just as upset that they would have to abandon their friends, gritting their teeth as they ran away. This is when one of them caught up to Gyubu, or whatever I called him, just for Issei to basically bull charge the one that was about to grab Kiba and said, "Kiba, get out of here!" as both Issei and the other one went and held them back. But then Hyuba is the one I'm talking about again. Hyuba said, "Issei, get out of here!" And this is when Issei said, activate his boosted gear, punching the guy who was attacking them in the face, who was actually a swordsman about as good as freed. And this is when he said, "No, get out of here." Issei being beat within an inch of his life, with swords and chopping left for dead, though the gauntlet had given him a better recovery feature. He could revive, he would heal and everything far faster. Any injury would basically be nothing to him. But there would also be the downside of it. While he would heal, being beaten up this bad still hurt like hell. And this is when he talked to the dragon, saying, "Let me survive this." And he said, "Alright, but you'll be in a coma for 3 days. And this is when everyone has already left the area and everything, so he's like, fine. But he knows that whatever I named him, Haidu, no, it's, I think, Hibu, whatever, that guy. We're just gonna call him Hibu at this point. Hibu is the one that, as he actually was escaping, he didn't meet Rias. He went in a completely opposite direction from Kiba. Kiba met Rias. Hibu actually met with Ophis and Vali and them. Being that he met with them, he actually joined them. Now, this would mean that he would be a little bit different than his friends. Now, Issei, he survived off sheer will, and after 3 days of being passed out and injured, he got up with the red dragon's green eyes. As he stood up and finally walked all the way to where he wanted to be, going back to his original family home, which was still kind of in his name, with a loophole that says it goes to him, And I'm going to say he's like 12 when this happens. And you have to be 13 to inherit all the property he inherited. But I'm going to say he does anyway. Like, they find a way to make it work. He just has to be checked in on by Child Protective Services every few days. And they know there's no parent in the house, so it's whatever. Making sure he had to be clean. And this happened for about a year, until Issei turned, 13, and then they left him alone. In his own home, which was the same house he was from canon, only in this version he actually had sparring weapon and gear like that all around. Issei, being a little bit surprised that everything was still just as boring, he was basically a master chef at this point, cooking himself some delicious food. But he never forgot the names of his two best friends, Kiba and Heiyu. I keep forgetting it myself. Haido. And Haibo, whatever, basically wouldn't forget Issei or them, but people kind of forget things a little bit over time, so he kind of forgot Issei's face. Mainly remembering Issei's hair, while he completely distinctly remembers Kiba, his face and hair, even his particular mole. While he would recognize Issei if he bust out the boosted gear, and Kiba would as well. Like, they would all recognize each other if they bust out their gears. The tiny wings that would show off of Hugh. I'm just gonna change it to Hugo or whatever. So yeah, that would bust off a Hugo's shoulders, which were spikes. Not very big spikes, but still spikes. Kiba went the ability yelling sword birth to make his weapons, and Issei just having the distinct gauntlet. And they were actually always training. Kiba wanting to avenge his people every day, he thinks about this. A little bit of having nightmares about what happened with Issei. Noting he just remembers that the guy who was about to catch him got bull charged by Issei, the top instructor, the one that even Issei could never defeat in a swords battle. Although he had one time defeated him with a holy sword against the dude with one regular steel sword, because the dude couldn't wield holy swords. But that was the only time he had defeated him, and with no holy sword, he was completely out of luck with no weapon. And every night he remembers Issei's face and Hugo's face very vividly. At one point even gritting his teeth and punching the ground when he woke up, leaving blood off his hands, and he just was sad and saying, I kinda miss y'all. Because they were his best friends. Like, they were family to him. For the few years for the years they were together in there, they were a family. A big family. It was just the three of them. They were the top three, but still, they were best friends. So, of course, they were all having nightmares about it. Although, being that both Kiba and Hugo both were able to meet devils and powerful people like that to turn them immortal, Issei didn't. He basically forced himself to stay alive. And at one point, Kiba was begging Rias to let him go and find whoever was left. Although Issei was already buried in snow. And they basically walked around him and didn't even notice him. Though, this is what kind of hurt the worst, is that Issei had no clue that they were there. And if they had seen each other, Rias would have instantly either had another knight, or Issei's actual 8 pawn pieces, which she was debating on if there was any other swordsman, should she take up the second knight piece she has. Although finding no one except for some chars on the ground from a gear, and saying, did one of them have a special gear? This is when she said yes, a boy named Issei. I can't remember his last name, sorry. He had the boosted gear, and he was the nicest kid you'd ever meet. Kind of being sad hearing this. And was there anyone with the speed-based gear? Yes, there was one, Hugo. He was the fastest out of anyone there, even outspeeding me. May even be able to still outspeed me. His power allowed him to steal half of someone's speed whenever he touched them, even if it was just with one attack. At one point, he'd even actually been able to uppercut me and take half my speed, and Issei's as well. Though he'd never been able to learn their last names. This is when Kiba would say, I really do miss them though. And only about 10 minutes later, right after they had left, this is when Volley with Hugo would actually go and they check the area, doing the same thing and saying, I was kind of worried that that would happen, as this is when we see Issei still buried in the snow, passed out. And only about an hour after they walk over him as well, once the footprints and everything's gone, he stands up out of the snow, awakened, though wondering if anything had happened in the area recently, but didn't see any footprints, so he wouldn't think there was. Looking around, noting that he was the only one left, he went over to the weapons vault, finding that there was no swords. Everything was evacuated. Every weapon there was gone. All the bodies were buried by someone. Thinking I highly doubt Valper would do this, but maybe some of the soldiers felt guilty enough to just bury the bodies. Gritting his teeth, saying, fine, whatever. As he stood up saying, alright, let's go home. And then he went to Kuo the same way. He met his friends, that all went canon. And while Kiba Yuto is still the crown prince of Kuo, he thinks, is that him? Could it possibly be him? And Kiba, seeing Issei, is like, could it be him? Could it possibly be that Issei? His hair looks so similar, but I highly doubt it's him. After all, I don't even think he has a gear. Then, hearing Ria say, it might be him. Though I highly doubt it, since you said everyone was dead. And there was charred marks and his blood on the ground. Though we couldn't find the body. Hearing this, Kiba's still just downtrodden, though thinking it might be him. There may be a chance he was turned into someone's servant like he was. Or even if not, there's a chance he may have just survived off sheer willpower. He was the strongest willed. He even had the Dragon of Domination. There's no way he wouldn't have survived. Though, after years of this, he had kind of gotten sad and not thinking he would even ever see his best friend again. And then, something would happen. He would have to deal with some small side effects. While they were, everything went as canon, until he had to fight Rainier. Because he's been doing nothing but training to get vengeance. Which puts his power roughly equivalent to Kiba's, or even above it, with no boosts. Body to body, they're about equal. But Kiba using Night Speed made him basically that much faster than Issei. And Issei using boosted gear is what equalized the whole Night Speed thing. That was all he had. Because Kiba was by far the fastest of them, but though Hugo would always just take their speed if he could ever land a hit on them. Anyway, back to the whole thing. Issei then says, oh, just one fallen's all they sent for me. Gritting his teeth, actually fighting at full force and speed. Ferocious like a tidal wave. No one had ever seen this kind of force. Just for him to sadly hit the ground and collapse. At the end of the fight, being completely exhausted. Although, he did note that it would still be harder for them to kill him than they had expected. Issei then saying, I'm not gonna die again, am I, Drake? I felt like I already did. Issei, this is the second time you're close to death like this. You may have to fight with all you have. And this is when Issei would start to yell, Balance Breaker! As he went into Balance Breaker, noting that this was already putting him above the Fallen. But this is when Freed would shoot Issei in the back before he had got armor on his back, and then he turned with a holy bullet through his back, being shot again and again and again, with light spears and everything being thrown at him, through all of the Fallen hitting him. This left Issei barely on his feet, as he said, you won't kill me that easily, as he sent one dragon shot, which was about to kill Freed, for Freed to barely be able to dodge out the way, and they kind of send one last bullet into Issei's forehead. He hits the ground, saying, no, not again. And he woke up the next morning completely confused. He was in his bed. He had no clue where Yuma was, or any of that, since he doesn't remember, he remembers them, but he doesn't know what's going on. And he felt a little bit odd. He felt weird. He wasn't sure what was going on. But then he just throws his weapon, walks away. Goes to school the same way he would his cannon, asks his friends about what's going on. His friends wouldn't have any answers. And then, this is when he actually sees Kiba again, saying it might be him. It might be him. Whatever. But then, next day, he has to meet up with Rias. He wakes up with Rias on his bed for a day of early training, which he didn't have set up that day, after dealing with, rain air. As he stood up and said, wow. And this is when he was actually introduced to everyone. And after school, he said he was told that someone would be sent to fetch him. Seeing Kiba was like, could it be him? And he said, my president would like to speak with you. As he said, as everyone was introduced, he said, so it is you, isn't it? What do you mean? You're that Kiba Yuto. As they're walking there. What do you mean, that Kiba Yuto? I mean, you're Kiba, from the Holy Sword Project. Kiba turning his head saying, how do you know about that? Issei saying, don't you remember me? It's me, Issei. I've expected you to remember me. And this is when he said, it couldn't be. How are you not dead? Everyone was killed. You sacrificed yourself to save me. How are you not done? I literally saw you almost get cut in half. And this is when Issei would say, look, showing the giant scar on his chest and all over his body. He was covered in scars. And this is when he said, really, man? I wish we could have found you. We couldn't find you at all. I was lying in the snow. Wait, where in the snow? There's no way we could not find you if you were just laying in the snow. Then this is when he says, right in front of where we busted out of. I fought them to a standstill there until I collapsed on the ground. And then I was just covered in snow. Wait, no way. I literally walked around there. I couldn't find you, man. I was out for 3 days, man. Wow. Well, you think if we survived, there was a chance that Hugo survived? He may have, I don't know. And this is when Issei would be introduced to the Parage, and then he actually stated something. Rias, what piece do I take up? This is when she would talk about how he's all 8 of her pawns, and this is when he said, that makes no sense. What do you mean? As Kiba and him started laughing. As she said, what's going on? Well, back in the Holy Sword Project, I was the best swordsman and Kiba was still rookie. Hey, I was still one of the best out there. You were barely stronger than Hugo. Still, Hugo was 3rd strongest. You were the top. What do you expect from me? I was between you two as dead stalemates between y'all. Ria's hearing this saying, wait, what? So you already knew each other for so long. Why haven't y'all talked or anything like friends? And this is when Issei said something unexpected. Honestly, I didn't recognize him. Well, I did a little bit, but I didn't think it was actually him. I know I told him to escape, but I didn't expect to see him in Kuo. I'd never known him to come here. And this is when Kiba said, I thought he was dead, honestly. You told me he was probably dead since all the injuries that it looked like he had sustained. And this is when Issei would say, I probably would have been if it wasn't for this. Busting out the boosted gear. Saying, if it wasn't for this little puppy, I probably would be. And this is when Rhea said, that's the boosted gear, right? Yeah. So, do you have any abilities with it yet? Yeah, I can go all the way up to Balance Breaker. Keep saying, no way. What do you think would happen if we fought right now? Well, have you gotten any better at Sword Burst? I can make any weapon I want. Got your Balance Breaker yet? No, I'm still trying to figure that one out. Alright. As Issei and Kiba were talking like old friends. And this is when Rhea said, I hate to cut the bromance, but you still have to do your own, like, tasks and everything. And he said, alright, well, how do I do it? Getting explained and sent off with no demonic power, as he was basically taken, as he had to ride a bike there. Saying, ah, crap, I hate riding the bike here. This is when he actually meets the, client, which is the same one that from canon. Not really caring, that stuff goes as canon, basically. But then we've got the event that would happen with Asya. He would still meet her the next day, and even then one of his contracts got him where he had to fight Freed. And Freed's like, how the hell are you not dead? Nah, you're not getting any balance breaker this time, starting to shoot at him, just for Issei to be able to slightly block and dodge it. And he said, I don't know if Rias would allow me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Promotion to knight. As Issei, who, as beastly as he is, got the speed boost of a knight, started flashing around, and actually being able to kick clean into the jaw of everyone's favorite psychopath, Freed. Freed actually having to spit some blood out, saying, dang, that guy hits hard. As he hit the ground, saying, as he gritted his teeth after hitting the ground, saying, I'll never go down like this. Calling the fallen angels. They come in and they're like, wait, what? He's not dead? Next day, he still meets up with Ossia and everything. And they start, talking, hanging out when Rainier still would come out of nowhere, trying to attack Issei. Just for Issei to speak, nope, and put a boot to her face. Then she kind of used, with Issei not being promoted or anything, he was just a pawn and throwing on his boosted gear. About to go into balance breaker, just for her to have vanished out of his sight, and him knowing that they're at the church, but he can't do anything. Going to the church is forbidden. As he told Rias what's going on, Keeb was knowing he had to be the one to help him. And Konako being great friends with Kiba, being one of the few people that she actually liked in the school, said, I'll help you too. Making it where Issei bull charged clean through to have to deal with what happened. As Issei has to deal with the consequences of being, who he is. One of the consequences being that no one can deal with him. Issei going all out in balance breaker first time, actually giving Kiba a little bit of a transfer of his power. Kiba being amazed by this and being surprised. Even granting one to Konako after 3 boosts as well. Them both saying we can handle them. They basically start mowing down all of the entirety of the fallen angels. Like all of the exorcists and all that were done. Just for Issei to have to deal with the only one Rainier, which he basically just punched clean through her stomach, saying heal that. After he had taken Ossia, roaring out, Ossia! I'm not going to let another one of my friends die! As he's about to think about turning her into a dragon, which is something he can do, but it would rip him apart. It's basically severing his own lifelines to connect someone else to them. But if he did that, he'd literally have to give up the boosted gear and his life to do so. Noting it was basically the equivalent of swapping death with someone. And he was about to do it when Rias would say, we can revive her. And this is when, as he put the two rings on her hand, saying, do it. As she became the bishop. And this is when they all went about things, and a few days later, Kiba was surprised. Actually, no, back to the whole thing. A few days later, he has to deal with Riser. And with Riser, he's still doing nothing but training with Kiba. And actually, Konako in this version was willing to train with him in the morning and afternoon. So he'd basically wake those two up to train. This would lead to a handful of sad events. One, none of them were ready for what actually was going down. Kiba wasn't ready at all for what was really going to have to happen at the Riser fight. So Rhea still busts in there, and he still has to deal with that. And right when he's about to accept her, this is when Greyfear grabs him and pulls him off and puts him and threw him back on his back, just for Issei to stand up. And when she calls him worthless, Issei said, "How dare you? I am Issei Hayodo, the Red Dragon Emperor." Hearing this, even Greyfear backed up a little bit, saying, "Uh-oh." And this is when Rias would say, "Calm down. We'll talk about this tomorrow in the club room, Issei." Alright. We'll talk about what's going on tomorrow in the club room. Alright. And this is when something unexpected at all would happen, as he started basically walking out. As he walked out there, he did something that no one was expecting. When Riser said, Riser has returned, issei, basically not caring, saying, alright, so Rias, what's going on? What was with last night? I'm not going to forget what happened. And she actually said, and this is when Greyfield would explain the whole engagement and all that, and issei was like, what? That makes no sense. Why would your parents force you to get into engagement with someone you hate? It's literally retarded. And this is when Riser said, Riser has returned to the human world, and he said, I guess speak of the devil. And issei said, this is when Rias and Greyfield would say, that's kind of insulting. The devil's not here. A demon boy is, but not the devil. Alright, well, whenever I meet the devil, I'm going to talk to him for a little bit. This is when issei would find out that that's actually Rias' older sibling. And he's like, what? That's badass. I'll need to spar with him at least once. And this is when Kiba started laughing, saying, only you would be willing to fight the strongest devil in existence. I mean, is he really that bad to deal with? Nah, not bad. He's just that powerful. Whatever. As Riser said, don't ignore me, boys. You two. I don't see a need for you to be part of my group of Rias's, as part of Rias's group. Although we could use you as servants. Not good ones, but servants nonetheless. Hearing this, actually being surprised as all hell. And this is when issei and Kiba said, what was that? You're going to turn us into servants while you're turning them into something nasty like that? Nah, hell no. We will beat y'all ass. We will beat yo ass so many times. And this is when issei said, I know you're a phoenix and you can regenerate, but I will beat your ass so many times that you will pray to God that you do not have to regenerate again for another ass whooping. I will literally cut you up with a sword that does not let you heal. Kind of surprising, issei Riser a little bit. He said, fine, that whole kind of thing happened. Just for the whole 5 days to get powerful enough to handle Riser and everything would happen. Issei would be like, alright, that's plenty of time. Not really 5 days, but like a week. Just for Issei to be like, alright, well, next morning, we all get together, we get our gear, and we training. Sure, I know a mountain villa where we can go. Issei saying, alright, well, let's meet at the bottom of the mountain, and we'll go to the top. Is that where the villa is, at the top? Yes. Sweet, let's go. They gather all their stuff, Issei grabbing his swords, which he only had about 3 of them, but still. It was kind of surprising for him to grab them, much less all of them. He grabbed all 3 of his swords. He had a broadsword, a katana, and a rapier. And yes, he actually does know Zora style, but he doesn't use that as much as he should be able to. Anyway, back to what if. And this is when Issei would basically pop there with a giant bag about half the size of Konako's. Them being a little bit surprised that Issei had so much stuff. And this is when he was like, oh, that's not it. As he pulled out another bag from a magic circle, because he can finally use that, twice as big as Konako's, saying, this is what the stuff Asya wanted to bring. Having the half the size of Konako's bag there. As he threw it on top of his own back, and then he took a small amount of stuff that was just in a smaller bag, and throwing that to Asya being like, I still have to carry a bag. Issei saying, yep. Can't just rely on magic the whole time. Alright. As Issei started walking away, as they started walking up the mountain, Konako, though Asya had the lightest load out of everyone by far, Issei was lifting so much weight that even Konako was kind of blushing, saying, he's so strong. Though Rias and Akano were not carrying anything because they were having Konako carry all their stuff. And Kiba was carrying his own stuff, so it wasn't that much. So, yeah, they all made up the mountain around the same time. Issei having the least struggle, for some reason, even though he was literally lifting the most. Actually asking Konako, who was falling behind, need a hand? Konako being a little bit blushed, saying no, in a kind of angered voice. She has to be strong, she thinks, but this is when issei would still cast a small spell that reduces the weight of her objects to about a half of what it is. Honestly, she wouldn't notice this since she was too busy blushing, but then she started getting up the mountain around the same speed as Kiba, thinking, yeah, she had a dinner. Just for whenever she had gotten all the way up the mountain and set her stuff down, issei would turn off the spell, noting that it took a lot of magic to maintain, and issei would basically just finish walking up the mountain with no spell on his own stuff. At this point, they would all start the actual training. Akeno with magic, Kiba with swordsmanship, Konako with strength. Although issei said, I'll be the all-around teacher, I guess. What do you mean? Well, even though Akeno is the queen, I have all the actual abilities that she seems not to know. And then saying, good point, she mainly just uses the bishop trait and the queen's capabilities. Alright, let's go. As overall, he was training Kiba on how to stay more durable in a fight, which he was basically always had to train Kiba, since Kiba seemed to forget that every single time. He was training Konako how to be faster on her feet, and even with faster strikes, which she was getting pretty fast at. With Akeno, he taught her and Rias how to actually fight physically, with Asya even learning how a little bit of use attack magic and physical fighting. As they were actually going to their same respective thing, they go into the fight just for a complete overwhelming victory. They were expecting everything to go crazy good, but then as issei is actually completely beating the living crap out of like 3 different, he basically said, roared at Riser to gather all his pieces, he would fight them. Thinking this was suicidal, issei said, y'all deal with Riser, all of y'all. I've got him. I've got the rest of them. As issei was basically standing in just a pair of blue jeans, tennis shoes, and a black tank top, getting in his regular fighting style, busting out the boosted gear, and even going into scale mail, saying, I am your opponent. Busting out the giant sword that he basically had, which was a giant iron broadsword. Think Guts from Berserk. As he pulls this out, he starts swinging it every swing, and he actually wound up getting challenged by the knight in a one-on-one. And he said, alright, but none of y'all are allowed to leave. Deal. As he put up a special little barrier, which kept all of them confined together. As in, they couldn't leave the barrier without issei being defeated. Issei hoping that they could actually take out Riser before this thing had to go on too long. Even he was doubting his own ability to fight all these at once. And this is when they were actually doing pretty well. Rias' destruction and Konako's strength hurting Riser a little bit. The sword was actually being able to hurt Riser with one that would nullify some of his healing, at least made him heal slower. And then Asya was throwing random attack like ice magic and water magic, with Akeno throwing lightning. And this is when he says, like, yeah, they're doing good. Although Riser is fighting them on a basically even scale, even with the training that they've been given. Making it where issei has actually defeated both the knights, and then he challenged all the pawns at once, saying that he'd have to deal with the bishops and rooks, and then the queen herself. That would be a pain, but she couldn't escape, none of them could, as all the pawns were easily defeated by issei. Then the rooks were difficult to fight, but he still won, barely. And then the final one was, even though he had to deal with the bishop, which was Riser's sister, and she had the same kind of healing properties, he tested something out. If he hit her one good time with enough force that would have knocked her clean out, with like a knockout punch, she would still, it wasn't an injury, it would just knock her out. She got knocked out and was retired. Then the final one he had to fight would be the queen. And even though issei was about half strength after this fight with every other piece, he actually was putting himself up to fight the queen. Just for every explosion she let off to hurt him a little bit, and him actually being able to defeat her right before she's about to tap out, boom. she put on another phoenix. She put on a single phoenix here, saying, "I'll defeat you." As she goes 1-1, as Kiba and Konoko are announced defeated. Issei kind of being a little bit terrified about this. If they're defeated, then he's royally screwed. He'll have to go fight. As he was basically able to one-shot her again, just for her to take another phoenix here and douse it on herself. Issei saying, as exhausted as he was only at a quarter of his strength, as he barely was able to win, as he was landing kind of injured, stumbling on every step he took. He literally got there, promoted to queen, and stood eye to eye with Riser. At this point, Akeno being taken out of the fight, and even Asya being kicked out of it as she was passed out. This is where it went to a one-on-one with Issei, who was barely even standing and stumbling on his steps. As Riser would punch Issei every time, Rhea still had so many feelings for him that she's still seeing that Riser was about to kill him. Rhea still kind of surrendered the fight. As Issei was taken to the hospital thing, he was having to recover. Noting Issei alone took out all of the pieces. Like, it literally took him alone to take them all out. Riser was only winning because of his immortality, and probably wouldn't have won if it had been like everyone else taking on the rest of them, and Kiba and Issei being the one to take him on first. If Issei took him on first, because Issei at the end with that wasn't even able to turn on Balance Breaker. Like, he straight up was out of it. All he had was one, like, boost he could do, and that was it. As Issei would start stumbling, as he would still go there and ask for a match, 1-1 with Riser. Riser thinking, I defeated him before, I can do it again. Just for him to think, just for Riser to realize, wait, he did take out all of my Parage, even my sister, which means he does know how to take on a Phoenix. Even if her healing ability isn't as good as mine, it's still impressive. Then again, I think he took him on in like sneak attacks and all that. Oh, wrong as he was, he didn't know how they lost. He just knew everyone else was taken out before all that, with him being the only one surprising them. Thinking he just used a technique that would make it where he could attack from multiple angles, or just using his, like, speed. Though, this is when Riser would actually be 1-1. Issei promoting to Queen, putting himself into Balance Breaker, absolutely wailing and destroying Riser, just for himself to take holy water and throw it on Riser. Riser being burned by this, and a cross, which actually was burning Issei's fist, which he actually gave to the dragon, same way he would in canon. Though he wouldn't need holy artifacts, he was doing this to basically pain Riser more and more. At one point, even having a holy sword that he knew about, like, he knew about this holy sword, though he wasn't able to wield it for more than much time. It was the dragon slaying sword. He pulled it out of another dimension, which that's where it mainly was kept, in heaven. Issei reaching his hand in, pulling it out, stabbing, just to put it back, saying, as exhausted as he was, that's made to slay dragons, not little phoenixes. As Issei stood tall as the only one winner. Right when he's about to do that final dragon shot, just to be basically stopped dead in his tracks by what he would never expect. He was stopped dead in his tracks by seeing the cute little phoenix girl he had knocked out before, threatening her the same way he would in canon. She would blush and get a little bit giddy, just for Issei to be a little bit tired. And right when everything went to fall apart, as Riser had surrendered, everyone there went to go grab Issei. Rias noting how heavy he was, having Konoko help carry him with Akeno putting her boobs on him just to, like, help. Said it was to help to hold him, but all she was doing was trying to flirt with him in his moment of almost death. Kiba, being the one who was actually doing all the heavy lifting, basically put Issei on his back and started hoisting him away with no wings. Because everyone else was flying, he was literally basically just forcing his, like, feet up. And he actually did let his wings out and try holding Issei, dragging him by, like, his belt loop. Making it where he was actually going pretty far and pretty fast. As they still escaped on the Griffins, then we got to deal with the Kokobeel fight. And whenever Issei finds out what happened, he's pissed. Just for an unexpected appearance of Hugo. Hugo would say, "You thought you could do this? Never. Those were our swords. The ones you two wield." As Kokubyo announced God was dead. And Hugo saying, "It's my turn, Galford." Hearing this, Galford Galilei would actually be like, "What? I thought you were on my side." Oh, crap. As he saw a sword flying in towards him, which wasn't a holy sword, it was actually a demonic one that was his own special sword. Using his own balance breaker, trying to fight Galper, and Free being the one to step in, Free was getting bombarded by 3 swordsmen, Issei with the magical sword he wielded, Kiba with the magical sword that he grabbed, his balance breaker, which he still wound up getting the same way, though it being thrown at him being everyone else's gym, not their 3 gym. When Galper actually said they were the 3 strongest, honestly, if they were actually willing to let them live, they would have, if Issei and them weren't bull charging everyone and fighting to protect the kids until they were forced to escape. Just while they hear this, Issei's pissed. Like, he's dead on willing to kill Galper Galilei. But when Galper realized the same thing, Kokubyo stole that kill. As they started walking forward, flying right up to him with their own devil wings, Issei in balance breaker with his sword out, and all of them going and trying to kill the dude. But then they got the most unexpected feat of strength to ever hit. Issei was still beating him just for the actual, White Dragon Emperor to come do the same thing that he did in canon. Kind of pissing off Issei, saying, "Another one took my kill." They still have the whole meeting, and all that goes as canon. Because Issei really didn't really need to use his power much in this. But then whenever, the White Dragon has to deal with, is trying to fight the Red Dragon, Issei straight up just beating down on him. Every punch will start to crack his jaw. He's straight up being gah. And then, Kiba, who's not sealed, who's not frozen in time, grits his teeth as he rammed a fist forward with his sword going in the other hand, punching someone who would never expected this, asking where he'd been all this time. Hugo saying, "Oh, just trying to end y'all." And he's like, "Why? We were your best friends, man. You abandoned me. You told me to run." And this is when Issei said, "I told you to get the fuck out of there." And I did. I did what you told me to do. I found someone strong. I found Volley. Apparently, the one I was meant to be befriended with. The original part of the gear I have. Issei saying, "Yeah, the original part." Every part can take its own choice, man. Everyone has their own self-control and everything. As Issei would kind of talk him down, just for him to actually stab Issei in the stomach with that sword he was wielding, just for Issei to pull out his berserk sword and swing it down, which actually ripped apart the sword that the dude was wielding, saying, "You can't kill me that easily, you know that." As Issei, in his last stance, hit the ground, Kiba having to be the one right as Issei was about to die, the Azazel still made the same comment about, this whole dimensional divide thing will divide half of Reese's boobs. Hearing this, Issei basically stomped up and basically stood up like Genos after he was almost defeated, where he basically just shot up onto his feet, and every step he took started to make the earth shake. Balance breaker. Critical over. As he just started hearing boost, boost, boost. Every hit he would just hear another boost. Just for another punch to hit, twice as strong as the last. And every punch that would land would almost rip apart This is when the Monkey King would show up, and so would Konako's sister, just to get them out of there. They still went to the underworld and did all that stuff that they had to deal with over there. And then they were dealing with the whole thing, normally. And when they were going over there down to deal with them normally, they were completely surprised on what they had to deal with. They were completely outmatched. They were outclassed. They were everything. There was no way to win this fight. And that's just what I'm saying, as Issei is basically tanking an attack that's meant to kill him. While Issei actually took away the poison from their lungs using magic, so all of the effects would actually hit him and not them. So he was basically taking what should have killed them. As Konako actually still fell in love with Issei the same way then, and saying this was her man. From that point on, Issei was actually with all the girls. And that went all canon. And then you have the whole fight with Cyborg, which, I mean, I know there's Kyoto, but that wouldn't really change at all, since whenever, like, they go to Kyoto, Issei's, like, energy ball would still kind of go out of nowhere, and that was a whole pain to deal with. The attacks would still be the same. I mean, the only thing that changes is that, like, Issei still had to get help by that one dragon, Shinlong, I think. Shinron, or whatever it was. Still need help from that one dragon to help him, like, survive. That one dragon having to help barely did much, but still helped him survive. As they were able to escape, but only barely, they were only somewhat able to survive. As Issei was still injured, critically having to use the booby lingual or whatever he calls it, to get that girl to be able to talk with her mother again. And all that went as canon, just for Issei to hit the ground. And when the Cyberwork fight happens, before he still tried talking to the dude's mom, and actually went with all out force. In this version, having to go into the balance breaker, at one point even saying, I may be able to do it if I was in Juggernaut Drive, but that would rip me apart before anything would happen that was helpful. Then he thinks there is a way, as he hit with 100 boosts, and kept boosting for like half an hour. And when he was finally done, he was at his complete limit on boosting. He couldn't go any higher at all. As he still tried doing the booby lingual, which almost tore his chest, which actually made blood spurt out of his sides and everything. His eyes started bleeding a little bit. Like his nose was bleeding. He had to cough blood out and everything. All that was happening. Even his ears started to bleed a little bit. As he was basically bleeding so badly that he actually hit the floor and collapsed out of balance breaker and everything, and had to be healed with a Phoenix Tear. Noting that this did actually help a lot, as she was able to somewhat move around in her sleep and not be just completely still. She was actually not really walking, but she was like she was about to wake up. They still had to do the same fight, and in the end basically everything went as canon until the Cyberorg fight, which Issei was basically pulling 2 swords out, even being gifted Durandal to have to fight using 3-sword style. He was using Kiba's balance breaker sword, Durandal, and his own sword, which he was used to dicing and slicing, and even had to deal with Riser and all them, like, supporting him, which he was happy to have, but still. As he collapsed and hit the ground, right when he was about to collapse, he'd basically been told to stop by the golden, like, lion, saying, you see my partner's already down, man, so you gotta stop. Please, you'll kill him if you keep going. As Issei looked down, seeing the dude still fighting, well, not fighting, but still standing with his fists balled, ready to launch one more attack. They were literally going hit to hit just for Issei to be the one still standing. I mean, don't get it wrong, Cyberorg was still standing, but he was down, he was out on his feet. Like, he straight up looked like Whitebeard in a sense. Like, basically dead on his feet. As he basically had to take another Phoenix Tear and give it to him, to both of them, since both of them were quite injured. And this barely helped them enough for them to be able to kind of escape. Not really escape, but then, like, after they had, like, lost. This is when Issei would have to deal with everything. And yeah, that's basically the end of the series, guys.